Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Silicon Valley TV series. Silicon Valley is an American comedy television series created by Mike Judge, John Altschuler, and Dave Krinsky. The series focuses on 6 young men who founded a startup company in Silicon Valley. The series premiered on April 6, 2014 on HBO. Silicon Valley is currently airing its 4th season, which premiered on April 23, 2017. The series has been renewed for a 5th season, which will premiere in 2018. Season 1. Richard Hendricks is a shy, reclusive programmer who works at a large internet company called Hulu. He is also developing a music app called Pied Piper in a live-in startup business incubator run by entrepreneur Erlich Bachman. After a rocky post-TED elevator pitch of Pied Piper to venture capitalist Peter Gregory, Hendricks also shows his work to a pair of programmers at Hulu who mock him within hours. However, Hulu executive Donald Jared Dunn and Gregory's assistant Monica discover that the app contains a revolutionary. Matt Ross proposes a $4 million buyout of Pied Piper, while Peter Gregory offers a $200,000 investment for 5% ownership in the company, an offer that would result in an equivalent valuation for the company. This leads Belson to increase his offer to $10 million. With encouragement from Monica and the support of Bachman, Hendricks chooses Gregory's offer. He hires the residents of the incubator, except for his friend Nelson, Big Head, Big Etty, to become the Pied Piper team, along with Dunn, who defects from Hulu. Hulu works to reverse engineer Pied Piper's algorithm based on the version he demonstrated, developing a copycat product called Nucleus. Gregory and Belson later each learn that Hendricks has been slated to present Pied Piper at TechCrunch Disrupt, a competition for unfunded startups. Belson is confounded by the news and responds by scheduling the announcement of Nucleus at the event. Hendricks explains to Monica that he meant to withdraw from the competition, but Gregory demands that the company follow through, in large part due to his rivalry with Belson. The countdown to the event means that Pied Piper has to be ready to show in less than 8 weeks, rather than Gregory's initial plan of 5 months. The team rushes to produce a feature-rich cloud storage platform based on their compression technology. At the TechCrunch event, Bachman takes the lead in a dramatic on-stage presentation of Pied Piper. However, the presentation is cut short when one of the judges assaults Bachman for having adulterous sex with both his current wife and ex-wife. Pied Piper automatically advances to the final round as recompense for the assault on Bachman. Belson presents Nucleus, which is integrated with all of Hulu's services and has compression performance equal to Pied Piper. Watching from the audience, the Pied Piper team generally admits defeat. Jared accosts strangers with pitches about pivoting the company in another direction, ending in his arrest by police. The team eventually retires to a hotel room, where Bachman nihilistically suggests jerking off every member of the audience, and the group launches into an engineering conversation about how to do that efficiently. The discussion sparks a sudden revelation in Hendricks, who spends the entire night coding. The next morning, Hendricks takes the lead in making Pied Piper's final presentation, having scrapped all of Pied Piper's other features overnight. Hendricks describes his new compression algorithm and demonstrates it. Hendricks' algorithm strongly outperforms Nucleus, and he is mobbed by eager investors. Season 2. In the immediate aftermath of their TechCrunch Disrupt victory, multiple venture capital firms offer to finance Pied Piper's Series A round. However, while expressing interest, several venture capitalists criticize Hendricks' lack of perceived direction and to come back with a more coherent vision. Bachman insists that this is a strategy to lower Pied Piper's valuation. He responds to each offer by insulting each venture capital firm. One offer from the company Endframe in particular is revealed to be a scam to steal trade secrets from Pied Piper developers. Peter Gregory dies while on vacation and is replaced by Laurie Bream to run Raviga Capital. Bream gives Richard the highest offer of all the VC firms, 20% equity at a $100 million valuation. Monica privately visits Richard to urge them to decline the offer, calling it a runaway valuation that they could never live up to, which would result in diluting Series A investors in future financing rounds. Richard offers Bream the same 20% equity, but at a $50 million valuation. Before he can collect the $10 million, Richard finds out at Peter Gregory's funeral that Hooley is suing Pied Piper for copyright infringement, claiming that Richard developed Pied Piper's compression algorithm on Hooley time using company equipment. The Pied Piper team knows the lawsuit is frivolous. Raviga retracts its offer. This has a domino effect. All the other VC firms retract their offers, claiming Bachman's behavior was rude and that the lawsuit added too much uncertainty. LaFlamme, Pied Piper's attorney, estimates the cost of the lawsuit to be $2.5 million, with the first $80,000 due immediately. Pied Piper cannot afford this retainer, but Hendricks receives a phone call from Gavin Belson. Richard secretly meets Belson at a Mexican restaurant, where Belson offers to buy out Pied Piper at a higher valuation than the initial $10 million offer. Richard rejects outright, claiming that he doesn't want his compression algorithm to become the property of the heartless Hooley Corporation. Belson convincingly argues that Pied Piper is no different. The ultimate objective of any company is to scale and become a publicly traded corporation just like Hooley. He insists the lawsuit will bankrupt Pied Piper, and that Richard should get something out of his company while still possible. Guilfoyle, Dinesh, and Bachman reject the buyout while Monica and Jared support it. As Richard is about to accept Belson's offer, he is confronted by Russ Hanneman, the wealthy man who put radio on the internet. Hanneman offers them $5 million despite the lawsuit, and Richard turns down Hooley's buyout offer. Richard quickly begins questioning his decision after learning about Hanneman's mercurial reputation and his excessive interference in day-to-day operation. Belson meets with his litigators to discuss a strategy for the lawsuit. They decide to promote Big Head to Hooley's moonshot department, Hooley XYZ, to make people think he created the compression algorithm, and Richard stole it to create Pied Piper. When Hooley Nucleus fails to carry 4K video at a pay-per-view event, Pied Piper tries to generate publicity by live streaming a stunt for an energy drink company, Homicide. Despite her promising rollout, Ehrlich's past with the Homicide CEO and issues with the stunt driver complicate matters to a point that Pied Piper ends up quitting the job and instead live streaming video of an unhatched condor egg. Endframe picks the event up for Homicide with a functioning, but lossy, 4K stream based on the Pied Piper algorithm, leaving Richard infuriated, but without legal options to stop Endframe. The Pied Piper team confronts Endframe about Endframe's theft of intellectual property, and during the visit Endframe brags that the large sales department will allow them to be successful despite their technical inferiority. Hanneman arranges for Endframe to buy Pied Piper, but Richard rejects the deal. Guilfoyle reveals that her post-it note with the administrator username and password he took from Endframe allowed him to retrieve sales contracts Pied Piper could use to poach Endframe's customers. Richard approaches the CEO of Intersight, a porn company, with whom Endframe was negotiating a $15 million deal, and offers them a technically superior deal. The Intersight CEO proposes a bake-off between Endframe and Pied Piper to see who can better compress their video data, but the competition is called off when Hanneman accidentally deletes a large portion of Intersight's video library from Intersight's servers. Big Head finds a prototype Nucleus phone left behind at a bar and, stunned at how bad Nucleus really is, provides it to Richard to use as leverage against Belson. Belson agrees to drop the lawsuit in favor of binding arbitration to prevent the press from finding out about the phone. At the arbitration, Hulis' lawyers don't appear to have a real case. However, an unintentional slip by Bachman leads Hooley to realize that Richard had used a Hooley computer to run a single test of Pied Piper, meaning that per the terms of Richard's employment contract, Hooley owns the rights to Pied Piper. Hooley calls Richard as a witness and, unwilling to lie under oath, Richard admits that he used a Hooley computer. However, while reviewing Harrod's contract with Hooley as part of the lawsuit, since Belson also sued for the illegal hiring of Jared from Hooley, the judge discovers that the contract has a clause that makes it unenforceable. Since Richard's contract also has this clause, along with many Hooley employees, the lawsuit is ruled in Pied Piper's favor. Thinking that they had lost Pied Piper to Hooley, Richard sends a text to the team to delete all of the Pied Piper code. But the deletion program crashes before any damage could be done. Meanwhile, the museum providing the video of the Condor egg decides to remove the camera due to low viewership numbers, but the technician taking it down falls and becomes trapped with the camera in a ravine. The feed of the injured technician goes viral, forcing Guilfoyle, Dinesh, Jared and Bachman to scramble to keep their servers online. Despite the high server load starting a small fire, the feed remains online until the technician is rescued. After it is clear that Hooley has no claim on Pied Piper, Raviga, impressed by Pied Piper's performance during the live stream, buys out Russ Hanneman's stake in Pied Piper, securing 3 of Pied Piper's 5 board seats. However, due to the previous incidents with Intersight and Homicide, Raviga has little confidence in Pied Piper's leadership. As Pied Piper celebrates their arbitration victory, Richard is notified that the now Raviga-run board has voted to remove him from the CEO position. Season 3. After failing to convince the board of directors to keep him on as Pied Piper CEO instead of demoting him to Chief Technology Officer, Richard threatens to quit and sue to regain his intellectual property. Richard meets with a company called Flutterbeam that wants to hire him as a CTO. However, after being disappointed by the work, he rejects the offer and decides to stay with Pied Piper. Afterwards, Richard meets with Jack Barker, Raviga's choice for the CEO of Pied Piper. Richard struggles under Barker's leadership, which includes spending money on extravagant officers, completely changing the business model to one that goes against the company ethos, and later forcing Richard to work on an idea that he himself came up as a poor idea to demonstrate his frustration. Eventually, when the time comes to pitch the idea to the board, Monica sides with Richard and votes against it. Subsequently, Laurie fires Jack in response to his mocking that she could do nothing to stop him, and she permits the team to commence work on the platform. The CEO position is left empty by Laurie. Meanwhile, at Hooli, Gavin Belson discovers that the now invalid employment contract would allow him to fire affected employees without severance and take back unvested stock options. Belson fires the entire Nucleus team and uses the profits from the reclaimed stock options to offer Big Head a $20 million severance package in exchange for non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreements. The fired Nucleus team goes to work for Endframe and managed to set up a rival product to Pied Piper, which Gavin purchases for $250 million, oblivious to the fact that he is hiring back the programmers he just fired. Big Head uses his $20 million to set up his own incubator, undercutting Ehrlich, so Ehrlich partners with him and then exploits Big Head's lack of business savvy to take control. However, because of Big Head and Ehrlich's spending habits, they declare bankruptcy, and Ehrlich is forced to sell his stake in Pied Piper to repay the debts. Meanwhile, after a story about Gavin scrubbing the internet of bad press about himself is leaked by Big Head, and an attempt to steal a copy of the Pied Piper beta leads to the resignation of all of Endframe, the Hooli board of directors vote to remove him as CEO. After being removed as CEO, Gavin decides to go on a holiday to take his mind off everything. At the airport, which hosts his private jet, he bumps into Jack Barker, the now fired CEO of Pied Piper. They have a little chat, wherein Gavin incorporates Jack into his Hooli revival. Gavin now makes a new presentation in front of the board of directors, where he tells them of his strategy to keep up with the industry. He introduces Jack Barker as the new head of development, and starts working on the box that Jack had set his mind to at Pied Piper. After regaining his CEO position, Richard fires the staff members Jack hired, and moves the company back into Ehrlich's house. The company hires contract engineers from around the world to help construct their application platform. Dinesh becomes attracted to one of them, a woman in Estonia, and initially she seems to reciprocate his feelings. He hacks together a superior video chat application using Pied Piper's algorithm to better pursue her, only to have her lose interest when she sees what he looks like over high-fidelity video. Eventually their platform reaches a point where they invite friends in the industry to test it, to universally positive reviews. The only negative response is from Monica, who says that she just doesn't understand how it works and that it seems too engineered. She encourages Richard to trust his own instincts and release the platform if he feels it is ready, which he does. After release, hundreds of thousands of people download the Pied Piper platform, leading to thoughts of a Series B funding round, and a sense of triumph when the Hooli board decides to allow it to be sold in the online Hooli store. However, only a small fraction of the people installing the platform remain as daily active users. Focus groups investigating why this is the case reveal that Monica's instincts were correct. Although it is an engineering triumph, most people do not understand how the platform works, and find its design confusing and counterintuitive. Richard decides that the best way to address this is through an outreach program to try and better explain the system, but this effort fails. Despondent, Richard expects the company to close down, but regains confidence at a sudden uptick in usership, which was due to Jared secretly employing a click farm in Bangladesh to artificially inflate usage statistics. Richard soon discovers the deception and confronts Jared about it, and they agree to keep the secret to themselves, but Dinesh and Guilfoyle soon realize what is happening. Dinesh gives Richard a scrambling program which would hide the evidence in the case of an audit. by future investors or regulators, which Richard seems prepared to use. Ehrlich, not knowing the real nature of the uptick, starts rumors about it, and plays competing VCs against each other, leading to a very lucrative potential Series B funding deal from Ravigo rival Coleman Blair. But before the deal is signed, Jared implores Richard not to take it, because it is based on fraud. An anxious Richard reveals the source of the uptick at the signing meeting, leading to the deal being scrapped, and the company's reputation plummeting. Lori no longer wishes for Ravigo to be associated with Pied Piper and moves to sell majority control to any investor. At first, the only person willing to buy seems to be Gavin Belson, who wishes to use the purchase to shut Pied Piper down permanently. But an unexpected windfall from the sale of a blog they bought while business partners leads Ehrlich and Big Head to buy control of the company. The original team, having regained control, prepares to pivot again, this time to become a video chat company. Based on the sudden popularity of Dinesh's video chat application which he included on the platform. Season 4. Richard must face the fact that he is unhappy working on the video chat app. His desire to pivot once again to something else is not met with support, and he decides to step down as CEO, at the same time as the rest of the group decides to replace him. Richard asks to keep the Pied Piper name for his project, and suggests Dinesh as the new CEO of Piper Chat. Richard instead decides to create a new internet, an idea Russ Hanneman gave him on what he wants to do with the algorithm. The new internet that Richard wants to create would be powered by a network of cell phones without any firewalls, viruses, and government regulations getting in the way. Richard plans on using his compression algorithm to compress files and make the new internet more compact and easier to use. It will include various features like the Huli platform, and the algorithm could be used as a Dropbox-esque software for the new internet. Richard eventually quits Piper Chat and starts his project. Meanwhile, Gavin Belson and Jack Barker, who were good friends whilst Jack created the Huli platform, become more estranged. Gavin gives Jack an office in Basement D, and Jack uses Piper Chat more than Hula Chat. Dinesh's power and greed go to his head when he becomes CEO of Piper Chat. He appears on news channels with too much hair product, and appears to be shaming Richard in front of the Valley. Richard is eventually banned from accessing usage data concerning the algorithm. Richard tries to get help from Jared, but he explains that his allegiance must now be to Dinesh. Big Head gives Richard his access code, and Richard discovers that 1/3 of the usage of the chat app are kids under 13 years old. Jared takes Dinesh to see the lawyer, who has been released from prison and is now working at a car wash. He tells Dinesh that the app is in violation of the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. Because of this, Dinesh, who is held personally responsible, will have to pay $16,000 per use by a child under 13. Dinesh now owes $21 billion if HES court, and eventually becomes depressed. Suddenly, he gets a call from Gavin Belson, who asks him to meet. Gavin tells Dinesh HES not going to buy out Piper Chat, but take it from him and convert all users to Hula Chat, on the basis that Dinesh has seemingly admitted to stealing Hula Chat's intellectual property. Dinesh almost immediately accepts, and due to his haste to get the data, Gavin completes his takeover with none of Hula's normally rigorous due diligence. As a result of this, Gavin puts Huli on the hook for all of the copper violations. And although Jack finds a way to delete the data and shut down the app before an audit can take place, this proves to be the last straw for the Huli board of directors, who remove him as CEO and expel him from the company. Meanwhile, after Ehrlich hijacks Jian Yang's pitch to investors for his seafood recipe app and presents it as a Shazam for food, Monica seizes the opportunity to set Laurie's new assistant up for a fall, which backfires when he learns that there is no demo and has Laurie put her in charge. Richard's new idea has started to wreak havoc on his sanity, and wanting to help him, Monica gives him access to Peter Gregory's old files, which reveal that he had seen the potential in a decentralized, peer-to-peer internet back in the 90s, but had abandoned it due to the lack of processing power on 90s-era computers, something that could be fixed with Richard's algorithm. Richard's elation turns into a rage-filled meltdown when he learns that the idea had been patented by Gavin Belson when he, along with Peter Gregory and others, founded Hooli in the 90s. When Jared goes to check on Richard after his meltdown, he finds he has disappeared. Richard arrives at the gate to Gavin's mansion and after ringing the bell, is let in. Gavin, who is distraught after Richard cost him his company, is initially insulted when Richard asks him to sign over the patent, and tells him that the idea is impossible, which was the main reason he patented it in the first place. However, after Richard shows him the effect the Pied Piper algorithm would have on Peter Gregory's old idea, Gavin is astounded, particularly upon realizing that the idea would render all of Hooli's servers obsolete. He and Richard become business partners in the new Pied Piper. Richard decides to recruit new people for his company, but eventually hires Jarrett and Guilfoyle for the project. Monica and Ehrlich focus their energy into Jian Yang's Shazam for Food project, but discover it can only classify foods as hot dogs and not hot dogs. Big Head decides to finish his education by enrolling at Stanford, but unintentionally is hired as a guest lecturer because of his popularity. Ehrlich decides to have Big Head's students work on the Shazam for Food app in order to not waste the $150,000 Raviga has invested. However, the students see through his deception and decide to form their own Shazam for Food app, with Coleman Blair as their investors. Ehrlich gives Jian Yang his stake in return for keeping the new modification to the incubator and Jian Yang's new Corvette. However, Jian Yang discovers a potential use for the app as a pornography filter, since it can identify dick pics, and the app is acquired by the live streaming app Periscope for $4 million, which nets both Raviga and Jian Yang a large windfall, saves Monica's job, and once again sees Ehrlich lose out on another potential fortune. Dinesh, the only person to remain working on the app, discovers that his main duty for the rest of his contractual period is to scrub photographs of penises from Periscope. As Richard presents the business plan for the decentralized internet project, he almost convinces Gavin to have a discreet, under-the-radar launch, but Bryce, a jock who regularly donates his blood to Belson and is present at the meeting, influences Gavin to have the team make a plan for a large, extravagant launch. After the meeting, a furious Richard and an enraged Jared warn Bryce not to interfere with their company. Gavin demands that Richard apologizes, and he visits Bryce, eventually discovering that he actually consumes marijuana and sugary snacks, and is not as healthy as Gavin thinks he is. Meanwhile, Ehrlich correctly predicts that Ed Chen is planning to force Laurie out of Raviga. When Monica tries to warn her, Laurie says she knew about this all along, rewarding Monica's loyalty with an invitation to be her partner on a new VC fund, as she always had planned to exit Raviga. Dinesh is paranoid about what his girlfriend Mia can do to him if she finds out that he didn't end Gavin's career at Hooli on purpose. He also doesn't have the courage to break up with her, producer, he admits that it was an accident, in the hopes that she will break up with him. Mia, however, knew this all along, and to reward Dinesh's courage, reveals to him that she has hacked access to the elevators at the Freedom Tower in New York City. He calls the FBI, who have Mia arrested. After this, he offers Richard his services. Having found out that Bryce was not only a corporate spy, but also had high cholesterol, a disillusioned Gavin decides to leave Palo Alto, handing Richard full ownership of the decentralized Internet patent. Russ Hanneman visits the incubator and angrily confronts Richard for presenting Gavin Belson with the decentralized Internet idea, which Russ considers he co-owns. Richard still tries to get Russ to fund them, but he urinates inside Ehrlich's yellow Corvette before leaving. After this, Richard decides to skip trying to convince investors and go directly to the customers, presenting the project to companies so they buy the product even if it's not built yet. After several meetings that fail, because all the Valley knows Gavin Belson has jumped ship, they present their idea to Liz, head of compliance at insurance company FGI, whose CTO and Liz's fiancé is Dan Melcher, who punched Ehrlich at TechCrunch Disrupt after he slept with his two former wives. Richard keeps Ehrlich at bay so that he doesn't put the deal at risk by seducing Liz, but ends up having sex with her during a late-night meeting. Even if Melcher is aware of this, the deal goes through. Meanwhile, Ehrlich inadvertently crashes into a tech meeting with Keenan Feldspar, whose VR headset is the Valley's latest sensation. Having previously failed to convince Monica and Laurie to hire him at their new VC company Bream Hall, he uses Feldspar and his promising tech as leverage to get a job with them. After Pied Piper's Space Saver app is online and reaches the top 500 apps on the Hulu store, Richard is contacted by Stuart Burke, a retired attorney that lives off royalties earned by patent trolling musicians and tech companies for intellectual property of the work. He asks Richard for a licensing fee of $20,000 as he owns the patent for the storage of media files on a network. Even if this is hardly enforceable, the costs of paying him are significantly lower than paying an attorney to dispute this in court. When Richard tries to convince some other top 500 apps owners to do a joint litigation against Burke, the plan backfires as Burke informs him that the other companies have reached out to him to settle at a discount rate, and if Richard wants to do it too, it will now cost him $300,000. Richard responds by pretending to use his old Pied Piper app to find a flaw in one of Burke's previous copyright claims, regaining full control of his patent without having to pay him. However, the failed joint litigation deal was drafted by Rom Laflamme, who charges Richard a fee of $22,000 for it. Meanwhile, Jian Yang buys a $14,000 intelligent refrigerator, which Guilfoyle obsesses over trying to hack, eventually using Pied Piper's former mainframe, Anton, to do it. Keenan Feldspar signs with Bream Hall, but Monica and Laurie avoid hiring Ehrlich by giving him a generous finder's fee. Ehrlich has already spread news that he is employed by Bream Hall and begs them to stay for half the money they are giving him, which they accept. Ed Chen invites him to a basketball game, but when Ehrlich gets to Oracle Arena, he finds out the invitation was to play, not watch. Trying to fit in, he buys a basketball hoop and falls off the roof trying to install it, breaking his leg. Due to a wave of unusually cold weather and consequent insurance claims, FGI faces a lot more data processing requirements than Pied Piper had expected to handle, and the team is facing an astronomical bill from their data storage center provider for the sudden spike Richard decides to attract investment from another client to handle this, approaching Ehrlich so that he gets Keenan Feldspar to hear their pitch. Richard thinks Feldspar's VR tech is a fad, but Dinesh and Guilfoyle are so impressed after trying it that they integrate Pied Piper's middle-out compression algorithm into Feldspar's VR, which greatly improves it. As a result, Feldspar offers to acquire Pied Piper altogether. Richard doesn't want this, so he counters with an offer of $25 million, with hopes that the offer will be rejected. But Keenan still accepts. Richard intends to concede, but Monica warns him that Feldspar's VR doesn't have future value and that helps walking into a trap, promising that she will fund their Series A round if they can implement the decentralized internet project on a sufficient number of cell phones. After texting him telling him the deal is off, Richard learns that Feldspar has already signed with Huli, abandoning Ehrlich in the process. Richard decides to enter HuliCon, Hula's tech conference, to put Monica's challenge into practice. Thank you for watching. Brought to you by WikiVidi Documentaries. Please like and subscribe below. Please like and subscribe below.